what the effect is and who's getting hired from colleges, who gets hired from ITT, who gets hired from your college. It's hard to know. Right.
Ready to take any questions?
We can take.
There you go.
Diane Gallagher, Highland Community College in Illinois. It seems like we are pitting ourselves against private colleges when really we like to see our populace educated. And rather than emphasizing our negativity towards them, what can we do for marketing efforts to help people understand more in the national highlight? I know we were a little concerned when the TV show came on, Community, and we were a little nervous. And I think so often we don't have the money to have the marketing staff that the for-profits do. But I've even asked about the ad consoles, national ad program, anything like that that would help people really maybe update their image of community colleges. For the Chronicle, because they also have an audience for the four-year schools, there is an image problem even there with the department heads about students that transfer in might not meet their criteria. Is there anything that you might recommend with the media?
Well, it's not part of my job description to recommend how to shape an image, but I do know when you're doing an effective job, that's generally the best way to show that you're doing an effective job is to actually do it.
Yeah. I mean, one thing is word of mouth, of course, and that works to your benefit and your disadvantage. Sometimes it really depends institution by institution and student by student even. But at the same time, you do have a couple of really big advocates on your side. Jill Biden, who's coming to speak tonight. President Obama definitely is conscious of this issue. Arne Duncan is one of his closest friends in the administration, and they play basketball regularly. And I've heard through the grapevine that there's been, that this kind of more general, issue has certainly come up in some of their casual conversations. And there you just kind of have the White House supporting community colleges to a big extent. But again, that doesn't get down to if you have a University of Phoenix ad on the buses and trains in your area, you don't have your community colleges ad there to kind of counterbalance it. And when I was at Inside Higher Ed, one of my colleagues did a story kind of looking at how some community colleges have tried to get into marketing more aggressively or advertising rather, and they're a mix of success and less so based on kind of how much money they had to spend and what kind of market they were in, and just kind of the effectiveness of their graphic design and that kind of stuff.
I sort of doubt you're going to be able to outspend ITT on an ad. One thing I noticed, even in the gainful employment, I covered one of the hearings, and I saw a little, but very little, evidence of people like from the business community getting up to support the for-profit college industry in that debate. And I continue to be very struck by that, because for all the talk in that sector about how they're training people for careers, I see very little coming back from hospital associations or nursing associations or even IT companies, sort of at least at the national level, about what they respect and what they, how many of these graduates that they hire. So I don't know if you have that in your community. There's probably evidence-based information is basically what sells the story.
Yeah, I just might add, in our county, we did have a for-profit come in. And we are very aggressive. And what I did is I met with the president of the for-profit. It was a pretty good for-profit, and said we can either be a collaborator or competitor. And we just have one or two. So what they did is they decided not to offer any first or second year courses, and we had an articulation agreement, actually housed them on one of our buildings and collected rent from them, basically because you know, in our New Jersey, we have $0. So people want to look at aggressive. But I'm going to tell you, the boards can do something, is allow your colleges to be more flexible. I hear from my colleagues, the presidents in other states, sometimes the boards are too restrictive. And if you want to compete with the not-for-profits, you better take a look at your rules and what you do. Let me just ask folks, one of the things I've noticed is some of the legislators actually might be taking some money from the for-profit. So when you go to see them, how could we tell if that was possible?
Well, that's kind of unfortunately the way, or maybe fortunately, depends on your point of view, the way that Washington works, is that, you know, executives or, you know, any ordinary person can give campaign contributions to anyone. And one thing you can do if you're specifically interested in your member of Congress is to go on the FEC's website and just kind of search your local members or, you know, your senators and see who their donors are. Or if you specifically suspect that, you know, one for-profit college is, you know, keeps getting talked up by your member of Congress, you know, search to see if anybody who's employed by that company has been giving donations.
This applies also in the states. A lot of the college, the bigger companies are very active at the state level as well, and it's harder for us to follow from Washington, but in your state house, if you know your state house reporters or your state state officials, I'm assuming, I mean, in
a lot of the states do have online systems where you can search for donations and see who's a registered lobbyist and all that also. And it would definitely vary state by state into just how detailed that is. And for us, as a national media, it's really, it would, you know, be a daunting task to have to go through all 50 states and figure out how much, you know, I'm sure that the big companies are spending millions in the states that we just can't keep tabs on.
You know, we do run it we try to run it every quarter to keep track because it's just been remarkably, a remarkable increase in the last just in the last year from what has historically been the lobbying level.
Right.
Question,
and the spending level.
Question back there.
Bill Kelly, Harper College, Illinois. I understand where community colleges can't necessarily, can't compete with the lobbyists for the privates, and we don't necessarily philosophically have an inclination to compete with the marketing money that they put in. Question is, what are some of the things you think we could learn that they are doing something right in addition to the lobbying and the marketing, which they're doing very, very well, and they're incredibly nimble? What are some of the things that they are doing right, in your estimation, that community colleges can learn from?
Right now, if I wanted to go to a ITT and start a program, I think I could start within 2 weeks. That's one thing. That's a capacity issue, but that's one thing that they are able to do very well. I can get enrolled fast. Part of that is, you know, the capital behind what they have. Part of it is that they've actually developed some very scalable models, so that, you know, for the things that you offer maybe in a more routine way, they offer a lot. They routinize a lot of what they do there, and to the degree that community colleges can routinize some of the things that they offer, there may be ways to be more student-friendly. Student-friendly is kind of a two-edged sword because there have been accusations that they're so student-friendly that they sometimes push students through who shouldn't be graduating or shouldn't be passing. But certainly scheduling is a giant area. The Obama administration is not talking about eliminating the year-round Pell Grants, but it's probably less of an issue for your colleges than it is for the for-profit colleges. But they're definitely designed to accommodate a working student in a way that even most community colleges are not, despite your mission to serve working students. And
certainly if you're looking at the difference between a brick and mortar community college class and an online for-profit class, those courses oftentimes have a model that allows students to do a lot of the work at whatever time of day or night they want. And for a working student, or, you know, that's kind of paramount to anything else in their decision making. Now, of course, you know, there are lots of community colleges out there that have online courses, and I think you need to talk those up. If you're confident in what they're doing, in the pedagogy behind them, then sell those. Sell those as you know, here's our, you know, you don't need to say here's our alternative to Argosy or here's our alternative, but can say, here is our great flexible way for you to take this class at whatever time during the day or night that you need to. But again, that means that you know, professors need to be able to be responsive, and all those things are very difficult when you're dealing with tight budgets. And you know, that's really a big difference between the for-profits and community colleges.
And the other thing to remember is the community part of community college. I mean, half of the people, assuming half of you are trustees in this room right now, and you know your community, you know your economic needs in your own community in a way, and in a way that you know, a national company is going to come in and they're going to do a lot of research and understand that, but they're not going to necessarily have the ties right then, and the ties that you've had from 20 years of living and sending your children to these schools and working for the companies in the area. So you have a lot of those built-in advantages. You also mentioned, I remember doing some stories way back when about articulation agreements between for-profit colleges and community colleges, and there were quite a few of them where they had, right on the campus of a community college. I always thought that was pretty clever.
Other questions? Let me ask you this. When you talk to the students that go to the for-profit, do you get any response about why they're willing to spend more money going to a for-profit than going to, say, a public institution?
I think it's a lot of the same reasons that we just talked about. It's the flexibility, it's the accommodation for whatever needs they have. It's even just kind of the hand-holding that the for-profits are very good at doing in helping students fill out their financial aid forms. I mean, a financial aid form is a confusing thing for most people. And if you're either a traditional age student or a non-traditional age student, it can be even more complicated. And so just having that little bit of help is something that a lot of students say that they really appreciate. And then, you get into, their own individual personal experiences of, they went to this community college and took a class that they didn't really like, so then they were like, oh, well, I'm going to try the for-profit across the street, and they just happened to hit a good class there, so then they, keep going with that for a while, and then they're, in a program to a point where they don't feel like they can really, drop out even if they don't absolutely love it. So that's certainly a piece of it.
Yeah, actually, that's another thing that they, for good or for ill, there's a lot of sort of sequencing in the for-profit curriculum. It's a design program. You start here, your next step is here, your next step is here. So it means you know exactly where when you start, you know what you're going to be taking for the next 2 years. You know how it's going to, when you're going to be taking it. It might mean it's harder to transfer out of it later on if you didn't like it, and that's another reason you might stay, but it also means when you start, you see the end path right at the beginning, and that's for a lot of students, particularly those who are older, who have started out at a different environment before and are coming back to college now, that's certainly an advantage. It's interesting though, for every for-profit college that tells you, oh, our students all started at community colleges and they didn't like it, so now they're here, you hear it the other way around at community colleges, oh, we have students who started at a for-profit college and they didn't like it and now they're here. So I suspect that's part of there's a lot of revolving doors between the two sectors.
Question?
John Giardino, Colorado Mountain College. Recently, the Colorado Commission on Higher Education has been looking at providing public dollars for students, financial aid to private for-profit colleges. They're discussing now whether they stop providing the money, which would be difficult for the students, or with this money there is no accountability. So can they put into place some accountability measures? And you talked about the dollars and the lobbyists that they have, that's difficult to do. Are you aware of what other states might be doing in looking at those things?
I think I'm remembering that Tennessee cut the aid maybe a year or two ago. If there's anyone here from Tennessee, they could tell me about that. It's a perennial issue, and it's one of the reasons colleges have so many lobbyists in the states. Obviously, in California, the Cal grants are allowed at the for-profit colleges. For a lot of these for-profit colleges, again, this 90-10 formula where you can't get more than 90% of your revenue from federal sources. Well, part of the 10 is often the the state grant program. So they fight pretty aggressively about trying to keep that.
And well, in terms of state regulations, there's also just huge variety state by state in terms of how toughly or how much or little regulation there is by the state governments, and that kind of fits into what you're saying. If your state doesn't have a regulatory body in place that oversees and inspects and visits for-profit colleges, then if the state also at the same time is giving money to the for-profit colleges through student aid programs, it's unlikely that there's any kind of accountability tied into that.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the case. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one question from me. Well, we're going to probably wrap up in a few minutes. I noticed that in the public colleges, like mine is a highly unionized state. Yet my competitors, when they come in, don't have, I don't see a lot of for-profits have union issues. Also, they hire their faculty. I think one of them told me they hire their faculty for 35 hours a week, as opposed to contract where most community colleges are 15 contact hours in teaching classes. You see that as a competitive advantage?
Well, certainly the stuff on the unions, I went back when I was at Inside Higher Ed, I covered a big weekend of adjuncts who are often work at a community college, a private college, a for-profit college, just to make ends meet. And there with them and with AFT and with NEA, there's a lot of there have been a lot of efforts to try to organize faculty at for-profits. There was one attempt at the Art Institute, I think in Seattle, that got pretty far along, and then right as they were about to have a final vote on it, I think, there was this point where faculty members started getting called into one of the administrator's offices and basically told, you can't vote for this, like this is bad for your job, this is going to hurt you, this isn't going to help you. And so they weren't able, the unionizing vote, which was expected to be successful, ended up failing. And so, if you want to kind of have this apples to apples, we have a unionized faculty, they have a unionized faculty, that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. And, whether you think unions are good or bad, it's something that the for-profits have been very good, like a lot of other big corporations, at pushing back on.
Yeah, the union issue is one. It's just even the nature of the faculty. Most of the for-profit colleges don't have a full-time faculty at all. Really, they have a core faculty that develop the courses, and then they have a very large.
And at one of the big for-profits that's publicly traded, their full-time faculty might be 100 people or 200 people.
Phoenix has 290 full-time faculty and something like 25 or 30,000 part-time faculty. Yeah. I mean, it's so it's the ultimate adjunctification of higher education is occurring in those sectors. So even less so than the role of the union versus not union is just there's not a faculty presence in the same way that you would have a faculty presence at your college, sort of helping to with faculty councils and. There are deans and there are people with those titles, but they have different kinds of power.
That's great.
Just to say less.
That's great information. Next time the union approaches me, I can tell them wait till they get 45, 50,000 adjuncts, and we'll talk. Next question.
Actually, this would be a comment. My name is Jim Michaels. I'm a trustee at Blumenstyk Community College. I'm a retired consulting engineer, and when I built my firm, one of the critical skills was when we moved from manual drafting to computer-aided drafting. The community college system had not identified a clear path as to software of choice and other methods to do this, whereas we found that graduates from ITT specifically were more ready to produce a drawing than graduates from a community college. ITT was also very successful in job placement. My firm grew to a size of 75 employees, and in order to fill the needs of our computer-aided drafting requirements, we went to recruiters, and while that was rather expensive, it was filled our immediate needs. And I did find that the ITT was more directly involved in placement of their graduates than, say, graduates from other institutions. So I think that's part of their success.
Oh, and they have the capital to invest in the equipment. And I've not been to an ITT. I've been to DeVry, and this looks like pretty state-of-the-art stuff to me. I mean, I'm not an expert in it, but it looks, they certainly have sophisticated labs and sophisticated.
Yeah, a little more focused than what we are. Right. Thank you.
Any closing comments?
No, keep watching. It's going to, the next few weeks are going to have the gainful employment rule, action on lawsuits, another Harkin hearing, probably a lot of congressional debate about the 90-10 rule and Pell Grants, and
also this continuing resolution on the budget that includes that Republicans and Democrats, a mix in the House, are pushing to kind of unfund, kind of like health care, to unfund for the rest of the fiscal year the gainful employment regulations that are already out there.
Right. And then once the gainful employment regulations come out, the lawsuit challenging the gainful employment regulations, which is already in the works.
Yeah.
Well, Goldie and Jennifer, thank you so much for coming out and informing us. You've been very, very informative for all the things that are going on in probably a sector that we don't know as much about. So thank you. We appreciate their coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please remember, feedback is important. Fill out your evaluation forms. And then we are noticed that our schedule's changed, so the next session is kind of moved up. Thank you.